welcome this august panel here, and thank you iDAC and ISOLA and the fraternity for welcoming us. We will keep it short, 5 minutes to set the context. Can I have the presentation that I sent? Right, so to set the context, I've made a pun on the word heat island and called it heat, tile and effect. The context of today's discussion will be what is the impact of construction materials on climate change, and how as an industry, as a profession, we can do our bit to find a roadmap that will maybe mitigate some effects that construction industry brings. From a master planning perspective, India is headed towards more and more urbanization or densification of construction. You have buildings everywhere with only, scattered open spaces. This obviously leads to the heat island effect. The idea of having this panel discussion on construction materials is, of course, very generously sponsored by Simpolo, where I think we will all focus on what are the things that Simpolo is doing as a leading tile manufacturer to help us achieve these goals. Our very young minister, Mr. Aditya Thackeray, has said that Bombay will be carbon neutral by 2050. So he will be looking at the real estate industry, at the tile manufacturers, at the transportation planners, at energy companies, and we are in a position to give him the tools to achieve this. And trust me, all the FSI implications, GST, taxes, and other things we're in a position to make those changes. And I think this is a great forum. Whilst I don't think we have the answers to everything, it's a great forum to understand the issues and raise some relevant questions. So if I can, I don't think they've found have you found the presentation? Okay, so just now that I've said the master planning context, we're already doing green buildings as part of our, contribution to the environment. But what of the material choices? What choices do we have in today's world, and how green are they? Can we make them greener? And who will set those guidelines? Are we going to pave the way for the tile industry to respond to? Do they have some suggestions that we can incorporate? So I think let's discuss these things. The points of debate will be, what is the carbon footprint of, let's say, a tile in today's world? How is it different from using local stone? Because as you all know, in IGBC, you use materials which are within 500 meter radius. So let's say South India will use basalt and granite. Is that the way to go? And maybe West Bengal, because it doesn't have any stone, we use only tiles. Is that the way to go? So I think these are points of debate, and I will invite, first of all, Siddharth to give us a little insight into what green initiative Simpolo is taking, and then we'll take the debate forward.
Thank you so much. Before I speak anything, I'm very grateful and very privileged to share a dais with all of the masters here. So as far as the sustainability and the green is concerned, as a part of IGBC, so we are a part of IGBC as well. We work on reusing the waste material a lot in the manufacturing plant. For example, we have ETP plants across our manufacturing units, where we use the wastewater to for the next batch. We have dust collectors, of course, for keeping the environment clean, as well as we keep them in our composition. The dust that we collect with the dust collector, we use them to make tiles. also the tiles which are rejected or are not, premium quality, we also reuse them, we upcycle them, we crush them to fine powder, and we use them for sanitary ware where the certain hardness or certain strength is required. Also we use molds, this plaster of Paris molds. We use them after the absorption capacity is done of POP molds. We give them back to the industry like cement manufacturers. They use POPs. So those molds are also reused to make cements. So these are the certain things that we are doing at the manufacturing level, and of course the product level I'll speak about it when she
Right.
indicates.
Thank you. So that's great. I mean, you're doing a lot of things in the process to keep it green. But as a company, have you measured your carbon footprint? Have you understood what are the implications or what's the impact of the entire, your whole network, your distribution system, the carbon footprint that is generated? What is the embodied carbon? Is there a push in the industry to measure these things tangibly and then to do mitigation? Is it part of the industry now? Because a lot of companies who are coming in and the Googles, the Amazons who are renting commercial spaces are very, very particular about ESG goals, and they want to know that architects and landscape architects are using materials with low embodied carbon or companies, of course, supply chain logistics, green supply chains. So they want the companies who are making the materials to also be carbon neutral. So is there a trend in the industry that is actually doing this?
Yes, but not. It's not very conscious, and it's not directly, pointed towards the carbon footprint.
Right.
But there are certain things that is done to, first of all, the tile industry. Right. What we are doing is we are reducing the use of the natural stones and natural marbles, so that the actual reservoir of this metal is saved. You can have the natural stone, we can photo shoot it, and we can have the same quality of material in ceramic, and better than the natural stones, right? But there's something that we need to work on. Absolutely. Right. And we will for sure once we go back from here, and maybe in 2023 we'll discuss about that.
Great. Roshni, any thoughts on this?
Sure. I think there is a lot that is there when you consider tiles and landscape design, starting from the embodied energy, as you pointed out. So what raw materials have gone to it? So if Simpolo is saying that they are replacing virgin materials with any kind of recycled or any material, so that is the first opportunity. The second, I have visited a lot of tile factories, seen the kind of pollution that happens in the surrounding areas. Exactly. The fine dust particulate that collects. So somehow be able to stop that kind of pollution from happening. And then there is I don't know about their tiles, but we like vitrified tiles in our homes, and so the process of making the tiles better and better makes them even more and more energy intensive. So energy intensity, how they can sort of either by using solar panels in their plants or something like that. So as you're saying, how to reduce the carbon footprint, that's the first step of the product itself. But beyond that, I think in landscape design today, what is becoming more important is the urban heat island effect. And while we introduce a lot of plants and trees and greenery in our landscape design, the hardscapes contribute to the heat island. So one has to be very sensitive to this as to how whether it is reflective tiles. You can have a tile with a high SRI, solar reflective index, or you can have tiles which allow plants to grow within, like grass or lawn or turf. So that is another way of reducing the effect. And lastly, I think somebody mentioned in the earlier session about porous or pervious concrete. So how can we make the material such that the water can percolate Because today the biggest problem we are having is that water is not going down, going into the storm water and causing huge floods for us. So I think from the tile manufacturer and landscape design, there's a whole lot to do, and that can be done.
Great, thank you, Roshni.
Just a tiny bit of thing I'd like to add, that we have already worked on SRI, as you said. I think the US Council consider the 76 SRI to be, a good for this reflective. But we have developed a body that goes up to 94 to 96 SRI. So we are working on that for the roof as well as for the outdoors. And when Rishikesh was there at our plant, I think 8-10 months back, we had a discussion regarding the pervious outdoor tiles, and we have started working on it, and hopefully we'll make something sensible soon.
Great steps. Though to butt in and to be a little contradictory, if you're having high SRI, you're just reflecting the heat into the environment, you're making it hotter. So you're going to have more HVAC. So it's a double-edged sword, and we need to look at how we mitigate that. Just having as high SRI really doesn't work. And I think I've brought it up at IGBC councils a number of times. But anyway, from a corporate perspective, I would like to ask Liz. Liz is a very close friend, so I'm just calling her Liz. Are the corporates very particular about the eco-friendly quotient of materials that we use? And what do you think is important for us as landscape designers on hardscape versus softscape, especially in an urban context like Mumbai?
Am I audible? Yes, so when you work for a corporate or a developer, there are very clearly set parameters on which choices for materials have been made, and which is aesthetics, it's the cost, it's the functionality as well, which is whether it's a fire driveway, it's a vehicular driveway, it's a footpath. And sustainability I've always found to be taking a back seat, and we have to keep bringing it as designers, educating our peers and the people that we work with, our colleagues, that we need to consider the sustainability. So we start introducing reinforced turf or pervious concrete. Like MOF is very particular that you have to keep your the recreational ground pervious. At the same time, that is the only space where we get to put in our sports courts or amenities for the residents, and that's also important. But can we specify the right, product for it? Can it become permeable? Yes, it can, and we have done that. So we continue making or educating our colleagues that while considering the use of materials, we need to consider sustainability. Some of the challenges we do face is that, we get into conflicts. For example, some of the fire officers do not accept reinforced turf as a surface on which a fire tender can run. And we have battled this so many times, saying that it is prescribed in the National Building Code, it is suitable. All over the world, people, fire tenders run on reinforced grass, but yet they want, the first 6 meters has to be completely hard paved, and the next 3 meters possibly turf, or they don't take guarantee for it. So, corporates are caught in these battles, and it becomes very difficult then when you have to prioritize, say, safety over sustainability. Another thing is the materials. Not all of them, when we meet with vendors or dealers, they're talking about costs, they're talking about aesthetics, they're talking about how quickly they can get it or what sizes. Very few talk about the sustainability aspects, and I would love to hear more about it, because that would help us to make better and informed choices.
Right. So my next question is for Kunal. He's obviously worked with celebrities. And Kunal, as a landscape designer, can you push the sustainability agenda to these people who have a very high influence in our society? People follow Bollywood, they follow celebrities. How aware are they of the sustainability agenda of our country, and how inclined are they to use more eco-friendly materials? And what is it that you can do in your position as a landscape designer, or all of us can do in our fraternity to help push that agenda?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me over. That's a lovely question. Well, all said and done, I think whether it's a Bollywood client or whether it's a normal client, I believe that clients do need to be made aware of what role does sustainability play, and it doesn't need to be superficial. So we as landscape architects were to define sustainability. I would say, if you were to ask me a question, what is beautiful in today's day and age, I would just say anything that's sustainable in today's day and age is beautiful. So coming to the terms of vanity, if you can terminalize the word beautiful as sustainable,
Lovely.
then you've won the battle halfway through at least. It is tough to convince people because normally sustainable practices are expensive and they're not cheap. It's just like organic food in the market. It's at least 5x more than the normal food that you'd buy. So making them realize over a period of time that it's a community effort, everyone around needs to be doing it, and make them realize benefits. It's about educating, but yeah, it's a tough role to endeavor in. But I feel even above that, I think we as landscape architects should be aware that what sustainability does to us, because I see more often than not, creating sustainable practices are not easy interventions in our own designs.
Right.
We are also vain as human beings. We want to see beautiful things. We want to see things which are instantaneous in results, right? So how much are we willing to let go of that part of the vanity?
Exactly.
To let go for the sake of sustainability and then project it to the client is a bigger question for me than the Bollywood star, because I think we need to get convinced first, and then does the question go to the client.
Tagging on to your opinion, how much of that choice of materials that we have should be dictated by consumer taste or by what people want, and how much of that choice should be dictated by its impact on climate change today? How can we influence the government? I mean, should we have a set of urban design guidelines that say, I mean, we already have IGBC, but it's not mandated, right? So can we have a set of urban design guidelines that can be mandated by government and say that yes, for this, like how Europe has, Britain has, they have certain heritage conservatory areas where you can only use, in Cotswold, you can only use the Cotswold quartz stone. Can we do that in our country? Can we, or is individual taste and cost, which is a huge factor in how we make our choices, should that be given more importance? Can any one of you pick up the question?
Yeah, I think that making things mandatory, guidelines at least helps. There are so many cities. For example, we talked about urban heat island effect. Like Arizona, they ultimately had to change the material of entire airport. Absolutely. Because it was causing the temperatures to be at least 5-6 degrees higher more than the rest of the place.
Yes.
So
Sydney has also done that.
Had to take a decision, change the entire material of the airport and the roads there. So, from a larger perspective, we are talking about climate resilience, we are talking about the future. We cannot stop climate change anymore. We are facing the consequences already. So what we can do, I mean, government is now coming up with huge plans. I'm also part of some committees at the national level where we are thinking about these things. So definitely making these kind of at least guidelines, if not mandatory, maybe at a future point even mandatory would be important, because unless you mandate, people don't do it. So yes, I think it should be there in order to, unless we will face the consequences otherwise.
So I think mandatory works for a lot of developers because they'll do it if it's compliance. I'm talking from a corporate perspective, and I think Liz will agree with that. Because if it's compliance, then they'll do it. But what I think also works very well is incentives. How can we incentivize the tile industry to give us materials or make the choices available such that any choice you pick will be green? Is that possible?
Yes, it is certainly possible. The same, it's like a reward and threat.
Yes.
Right. So if government, let's say, gives give some
Incentives.
rewards in terms of, as you said, taxes or some
GST.
benefits which
Yeah.
which could also lower the prices also at some point. So I think it is doable and it can be thought of, certainly.
What are your thoughts, Kunal or Liz?
I would agree. It needs to be mandatory. We have kind of run out of time, and I think just by providing guidelines is not good enough any longer. So it has to become mandatory, and standards set by the government for all developers to comply with. It's extremely important because left to individuals or corporates, they will continue making choices based on costs or aesthetics, and that always doesn't work for a sustainable future. And I see more and more that the clients are the younger generation who are very well aware of sustainable aspects. In fact, our children and our the next generation is actually far more aware than when we were at their age. And I think they will buy into these kind of things. They definitely identify with sustainability goals. So making choices, and when it's mandatory, and whether it is emission levels or electronics, everything is moving in that direction. I think in the real estate industry, the materials and the sustainability aspect is slightly behind, and unless it's made mandatory, it's only then when people will wake up and start making the choices. So, I welcome that, from a government perspective, things become more strict, and as well as from the product perspective, people start marketing their products as green products, so that it, is able. We are able to use these things.
Well, I don't have much to say on this, but I just feel we talk about mandates, we talk about regulations. I just hope someday that we as environmentalists, landscape architects would be the panel of people actually collating these mandates rather than the government bodies. I think the rest of it my colleagues have already spoken about. I'm just giving you a simple example. We were on a site and discussing about felling a few trees, and the mandate is that if you take off one tree, you need to plant 10 palms. And I didn't ever know that palms are actually trees. So who is this privileged person in the government body who's decided one fine day to make 10 palms versus to one tree as the equivalent to each other? So we may debate, talk, discuss everything, but I think we as individuals need to get involved into these bodies to make these mandates, because otherwise they'll never meet up to our expectations.
I see a lot of synergy here between what the landscape fraternity is thinking and where the tile industry is moving. The industry, people in the industry, of course, I think are far more exposed to trends because they are always having to compete with each other, to compete in the global stage. I think as designers, when we talk about guidelines or incentives, we have to work more in an interdisciplinary manner, talk to government agencies, talk to NGOs, talk to academicians, so maybe more sessions that ISOLA or iDAC can put together to have intelligent conversations and to come up with an agenda that will suit both like in nature, you have a symbiotic relationship. So where industry and the profession benefit each other. I think we've raised a lot of questions. I don't know if we've gotten all the answers, but I think we should continue this conversation in this and other forums. And with that, I conclude. And if there are any more thoughts from the panel, yes, please.
Just one thought that one of the biggest problems we face today is about finding the right materials. Government has made mandatory energy conservation building code, but if you want to find in the market the material that is required, which is of the good efficiency, high efficiency, just one or two materials. So we need really a competition with more like these kind of products, so that and also cost effective. When they are available in plenty, they become more cost effective. So we need more of these
Suppliers, vendors. Yes,
vendors to come into the market and being recognized also. Then obviously this will be spreading more.
Siddharth, so basically, as part of the tile industry, you will be associated with CII. That's a great forum to raise these issues. If you can take our concerns to CII and then invite the more eminent, thought leaders, we can get a conversation going, because government listens to industry more than it listens to fraternity. Am I right? Yeah? Yes? Right. So I think, but we need a seat at the table. And the only way we can get a seat at the table is through our industry brothers. So I think, I think with this I conclude. Thank you all for your inputs. If there are any questions now, we'll take them.
So I really liked what Kunal said about sustainability should not be superficial. Sustainability should not be superficial. So he said this statement, but the question is to the developer, driven projects, which are totally unsustainable because literally we build up the whole land, So we have parking below, and then whatever we do on tile, on top of the tiles or whatever. So we are literally, the IGBC ratings and all are like a cover up. Don't you think so? So there has to be that process driven thing which has to, like, we as landscape architects are just there for developer projects just for beautification, which is like it's like makeup, So this is something which we all have been debating this a lot, but developers have to come up with answers regarding this.
Can you hear? Is it audible? Yes, Sujata, that's very well put, and I think the developers are also changing. Like in the organizations that I have worked with, I think one of the briefs is sustainability as well. So whether it is the plant palette that's there, for example, there was a project where we invited an ornithologist right at the beginning of the project to map the biodiversity all around. So one of it is to bring urban biodiversity into the project. So we started by doing that. We do a landscape replacement area mapping. So besides what is mandated by the government in terms of open space, recreational ground, so much on the ground, so much on the podium, we want to do much more. So like how Singapore has done. So Singapore has a landscape replacement area policy, which is mandatory. It's a high density island nation, which has such a low, it doesn't have too much of space to expand, but yet it's one of the most greenest city, and that's simply because of the stringent government guideline. It's mandatory. And now every designer is trying to outdo themselves in seeing how better they can do not just 100% LRA, which is the landscape replacement area, but 200%. So, you've got ground landscape on podiums, mid-amenity levels, at the sky decks, vertical landscape. And I think that is the direction we need to go. And, you see more and more of customers wanting that kind of. They are well-traveled, they have, visited other cities. And it is for the government to make these things mandatory. Because a lot of developers by choice may not go that route, either because of costs or aesthetics, or they couldn't bother about sustainability. So yes, there are certain developers who are very conscious about this thing, and their customers are demanding it. The ESG guidelines, there are a lot of the customers who ask whether you comply to this, and we take pride in proving that yes, we are complying to it.
We are covering up the entire land with concrete in a way, and then we are doing the landscape on top of the podiums or whatever.
You're saying why there's no Mother Earth?
Yes.
Yeah. So okay, let me take that bit. So when you work in a corporate setup or with developers, we will learn that the primary focus is the business plan. the business plan which will help the company make profit, right? So while governments and municipal authorities incentivize FSI, you can buy fungible FSI. I think we need to look at governments and municipalities who will incentivize green land. She's right. There are customers who are more woke, to use the young people's parlance, I don't know, who are more woke about, because they are well-traveled, especially in a metropolis like Mumbai. There are people who've traveled abroad. They know what ESG compliance is. There are multinational corporations coming in with very, very strict ESG guidelines. There are pension funds that are investing in our country, in our real estate companies. They are very, very strict about what the developer needs to deliver. So they are at least all the corporate ones are waking up to what is important. But their primary focus is the business plan. So how much profit they're making off per square foot, that's important. Now, if you want to keep their profits and also incentivize, also get more green, you have to change the way both governance thinks and companies think. Companies are also already moving towards larger and larger area of landscapes. Also parking, I agree, it's a huge problem. But that's because every individual in the city wants 2 cars. How many of you have 2 cars? How many of you use public transport? Wasn't there this guy who said that the city that is rich is when the rich use public transport, right? So, and Mumbai is great for public transport. I mean, I know it's in shambles sometimes, but you know, the government and the municipalities should be having high-speed trains. Why aren't all of us using public transport? We should. The very fact that the developer wants to give, now see, in Mumbai you can't sell parking. So they build it into the FSI, or they build it into the per square foot of every square feet that they are selling. So how do you disincentivize parking, and how do you increase public participation or public engagement with green spaces? Green spaces are already now becoming a very, very important factor in how you sell your property to, whether it's a customer, an individual customer, or it's a corporate client. So right now we're at that cusp where the developers are waking up. We need to get the government also sensitized to this. Now, how do we approach the government? There are various panels. In fact, the government of Mumbai, I think, has an open forum where people can tweet. There are a lot of people who engage in, I think there are local, I forget, the local governance bodies where you can, where the master plan is put up, you can talk. I think Aditya Thackeray himself, I salute that kid, sorry. But he's taken up this challenge of delivering Mumbai to being carbon neutral by 2050. How's he going to do it? And we can use this opportunity to jump in, talk to him, just go meet him, use the forum of iSolar. You can do a lot because there's one person who's willing to do it. Prime Minister has said 2070, but he said 2050. So we should take this opportunity to do this. Like I said, developers will jump in if the government incentivizes them. Of course, the government needs taxes as well, but there are ways to work through this. And I think if we all get together, we will find common ground.
So aren't we contradicting ourselves? And when we talk about IGVC and says only 20% of it should be lawn, why can't we? Why is that particular percentage determined? And can't we not? I understand the reason is that you have sprinklers and there's an evaporation loss, but we can also have drip irrigation for lawn also in a grid format. So why not we have reduce this by having more ground cover, by having more lawn, and reduce the like we spoke about, of course, materials which reflect less, etc., so on and so forth. But why not we consider that?
So can I? So I think very good point. These guidelines have come into being because of so many. I've been part of the formation of many of these guidelines. So I can say that not having turf or grass, the main reason is water. They consume water, or at least we have traditionally the habit of putting water on our lawns and that's it, and then they consume a lot of water. But it can be different in the sense you can use wastewater for your landscape. You can have sprinklers and drip systems and all that. And instead of the lawn, you can also have different types of ground cover. So all that has not been fine-tuned in some of these certifications, but yeah, it's a process, I guess. Yeah, that awareness is, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Sorry to add to you, it's a simple mathematical calculation. The surface area of a blade of grass and the surface area of a shrub, that will give you more green than lawn. Yeah, it's the same thing. What I'm saying is that the IGBC mandates lesser lawn because they would rather have shrubs than lawn. I think that's the founding principle of that particular clause. So, agree. Right. Sure. Right. Agree. Yes, spoken from a true developer's perspective, but from an environmental perspective, no, agree. No, I agree. But the point really over here is we're looking at it from a human perspective and we're looking at it from an ecological perspective. So there needs to be a balance. I agree. There needs to be a balance. With that, I think we need to wind up. Thank you all. Sorry, I think we've overshot by 10 minutes. Sorry, Rishikesh, wherever you are. So thank you. It was a wonderful discussion. Over to you.